My name is Bradley. I have a broad taste in music. Swans, To Be Kind, worst to best. To Be Kind is just one of those albums that you run across and it just sort of stops you in your tracks, and you just sort of are just awing at this 2-hour odyssey that is so unreal to the human mind. Yeah, I might be overselling it a bit. Look, this album is really good. Doing a worst to best on To Be Kind is kind of like picking a favorite child. It's not easy. You kind of love most of them the same. However, I just really needed to talk about this thing. I've referenced it a lot in my videos, and I feel like it's about time that I gave it the spotlight that it kind of deserves. This was one of the first albums I actually listened to that got me into music. This was one of those that I just sat down, paid attention to for 2 hours on a plane, and I boom, like boom, kapow, blow, boosh, oosh, whoosh, like crazy. Now, this is likely going to be an extremely long video. That means that you're going to hear a lot of background music, alright? So cue the background music. Ow! Turn it down a little, alright? Turn it down, come on! That's better. You're gonna hear a lot of background music, and you might not hear as many whoo, swoosh edits like you might. Because this is really important. This album to me is about as important as albums get. For something that's 2 hours in length, it never seems to slow down its intensity. It never seems to lose the suspense that it keeps the listener in. In fact, there's constant instrumental suspenses that occur to where it feels like the song itself is flying and suspended in the air, to where it almost takes you off your feet. It is such an unreal experience. And I just want to get into this because God damn, this album is too big for words. And I'm going to try my best to break it down song by song, worst to best style. What do you say we just do this? I am really excited. At the same time, kind of nervous. There's a lot to cover. Number 10 is She Loves Us. I mean, this song, even though it's the last, and a lot of people will disagree, a lot of people say that this is the best song on here. For me, it's like the lowest point, which is kind of like a joke statement. It's a super epic song that just tosses the listener into this groovy and epic cacophony of sound. The guitars and bright bells behind everything just serve as this great cushion, and the drums are so heavy but they're so light. In fact, the majority of this mix is extremely light starting off. And this song seems like it follows a very similar structure to the previous Bring the Sun, which was 2 songs before this, to where it seems like there's 2 preceding halves to it, with definitely a cushion in the middle and a cushion at the end. And the song structure for this is just unreal. It really does a good job at keeping this suspense in the second half when it does do its mid-cushioning part, which I'll get into because that part is so essential. It starts with this great like suspenseful, sinister tone with these really bright instrumentals backing everything, constant plucks, constant wow, to this almost inaudible, like you can't understand what the hell is going on, but you get it. It just is a march. It keeps marching on. The reason why it, for me specifically, it's the last song on here is because depending on the day, this is a song that if it locks you in, it is fantastic. It is a song that has no issues whatsoever. However, if it fails to lock you in, it could be a little lengthy at points, but still, it has some highlights that are some of the highest of the album, especially at the 4-minute mark where the song almost seems to completely break down and turn into this just a cacophony, just this absolute madness pit of guitars and drums just clashing together and having no sort of rhythm, and just blasting at these extremities, at these massive distortions, attacking each other. 2 sides clashing together with the instrumental itself building up in intensity and suspense, and it blows up like crazy. And that goes on for like 3 minutes before getting into the second part of the song, which is like do with these massive grooves. It's so bright. It's so blissful. It never seems to waste too much time in any specific area. I will say maybe the second half does drag a tiny bit too long, but it's just so, it sounds fantastic. And when you're listening to this album as a whole, as a full experience, it's almost like you're barely ever checking how long songs actually are, because everything is so seamless. It's constantly like jumping through wormholes, and this is a wormhole of its own. This song feels like this summoning. She Loves Us, it really reminds me of, say, a troubled child. And every song sort of captures its own feel. The troubled child thing sort of really falls here, especially with him screaming all these obscenities as the song keeps going on. Plus the mixing is fantastic. Nothing really just blows itself up too far. Even when the parts where it's this massive breakdown, nothing is cutting like through the mix in an awful way. You hear everything so cleanly. It's so epic, and it has this massive arena-sized feel where it almost feels like everything that's being shouted is like keeping a bull like maintained within a cage. The song constantly feels like it's malfunctioning and repairing itself, this constant cycle. And considering that the lyrics themselves almost always just completely confuse me, it allows me for interpretations of this song, and almost every single time I listen to it, I pull something different, I pull something new. And it's like a massive mystery that I'm always trying to solve. In fact, the bulk of this album, the lyrics themselves are almost just completely thrown out of the way just for this sound. It's like the sound and the lyrics clashing and colliding together create this beautiful experience to where it's like a story being told through sound. In fact, many times the instrumental and the constant changes and build-ups and pieces being thrown in just all over the place, like every 5 seconds, just builds into a story and an emotional experience. I've never seen an album succeed as well as this one does in terms of just mixing things up. This troubled and tortured sound going throughout here really just explodes when he starts screaming out, "Your name is fuck!" over and over, and the song just builds up intensity more and more and more, and everything just is flying all over the place, and you're locked until all of a sudden everything just seems to stop. Suspended in midair, and all you hear is these chants of like la la, and at this point it almost feels like the instrumental is almost let off of its chains. Like every single moment before that was it being suspended in midair and it trying to resist and it trying to move around and violently shake and try shattering out of its cage. Here it seems like it almost escapes, but all of a sudden the lights go out and no one knows what the hell happens until you hear this massive hit where it's like doo, 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 doo. And to me, this is like that monster finally being in perspective and stomping around and just causing havoc. It's just covered in chains. You see this thing is like 10 times larger than life. It is the biggest thing in the world, and it's just stomping, and it creates this massive aesthetic and experience that is unreal. The ending of this song really just wraps the entire thing up to where everything blows up and you finally get like what exactly he was aiming for. It really is just a phenomenal piece of art brought together with a fantastic conclusion. 9++, really just a great song. I know, right? This is the last song on here. It's already a 9++. This is kind of what we're in for. Number 9, Little God in My Hands. I feel like I could go into a lot of detail with this song, but I guess when people say I only like music that's explosive, I mean, this song took my eardrum virginity, and I was not disappointed. When it explodes, you hear the loudest blaring horn section you've ever heard in your whole life. These high-pitched frequencies just mixed all together where nothing is cutting out of the mix. I've never heard such a fantastic arrangement of just so much loud crap going on without any sort of without anything seeming like it's off, yet everything seeming so raw at the same time. Plus, it's extremely tasteful. It's not out of place. The explosion itself has a build-up. The second time that there is this explosion is a much longer build-up for a much more satisfying and unbelievably gorgeous explosion that is at the very tail end of this. Definitely the singing is very grainy and it takes a while to get used to, but once you do get used to it, you get locked into the feel. And it's part of the experience to where this unsettling, unhealthy vibe is just built on over and over and over again with every single song. And this grainy singing really kind of resembles She Loves Us in the sense to where both of these songs have similar elements. And unlike other songs, definitely the changes in this song and She Loves Us are extremely subtle. They're very small, very unnoticeable until you actually pay attention and realize what exactly is going on, because once you pay attention to the instrumental, you constantly see everything switching around all the time. It's so intense, it's so mind-boggling. And yes, the ending of this song is legendary. Like, it's one of those explosions you hear and you're just like blown back out of your seat. It is something that is so loud that you just have to hear this song. You just have to. This song is a 9++. some things we do. This is basically the necessary interlude after you hear Bring the Sun to Say Leviator. God damn it, man. This song is like everything you need. This is one of those songs that's separately, if someone just went to this album and is like, oh, you know, this is 2 hours, I don't feel like listening to it, I'll just listen to the smallest song, you know? And they click on this and they just hear they're gonna be like, well, that was not exciting. However, this is probably one of the most necessary songs on this entire album, especially considering its cushioning between the longest song and the second longest song. And it really adds this aesthetic that is just gorgeous. It is basically a bridge between the two songs. It is soothing and hypnotic and constantly goes to these themes of this very, very light song. We see, we love, we learn, we fuck, we sleep, we do. It runs through these things over and over until eventually it starts to just sort of repeat the things about love. And that absolutely is a fantastic transition into She Loves Us. The drones and sounds of this song nearly drop me to the floor. They're so relaxed. They're so toned down. At the same time, they're so dreary. Like my eyes are literally rolling down my face. It goes through themes of killing, loving, sleeping, crawling through my skin, seeking, eating, and none of this matters because it all just seems to come back to we fuck and we love. Now the instrumental of this song, specifically the melting of it, is really just the opus. The fact of this whole thing just falling apart where it looks like paint is like cracking off of the walls and peeling down and just turning into liquid as it does so. This extraordinarily twisted mindscape, especially when you hear the that constantly going on, just adds this suspenseful everything. I don't know. This song really just floors me. I wish that I was, like, I listened to this album right before I did this so I could get a head start, but like, all it did was remind me how much I love this thing and how excited it makes me. It's just so low-key. It's so beautiful. I got 0 complaints for this thing. It's a 10, honestly.
Granite pines, silver shine.
Ha ha ha. This song is so good. That's what I wrote down in my notes. That's really cringy. It's another slowdown, however, this is another one that seems extraordinarily necessary because after She Loves Us, the massive monster that's that, there's this and then Oxygen, which I think that this song ties extremely well into Oxygen. It almost seems like this song is rebirth and Oxygen is the celebration of that rebirth. It's like the ability to breathe, the ability to live, which is a massive theme throughout here. It's like a celebratory album of like the little things, like the things that we don't notice. The magnificence of birth and life itself in this massive interstellar size phenomenon. It really captures this throughout the sounds fantastically well. First you hear the ball bouncing and it's this extremely childish, slow, but extraordinarily relaxed lullaby type of song, much like the finishing song To Be Kind. The singing is extremely pretty and is backed with these heavenly pads that just give this thing center stage, especially with the singing. The singing is absolutely like the opus of the song. I say opus a lot because this is just, everything on here is like a freaking opus. The imagery that he sings about is larger than life, with planets crashing together and God raining ash, which really puts in perspective these smaller things and how magnificent they really are. It's putting life into this capsule, but yet at the same time it's like one of the strongest possible ways of doing so. When he says, and what comes next, and you hear that high-pitched, arpeggiated frequency, it sounds glorious. Like it's one of the many moments on here that sounds perfect, an actual perfect perfection moment. The drums on the second half are mixed so extraordinarily well, but something always felt so off about them for me. It's so odd how I've never really heard something that was mixed like this. It almost seems like this really heavy death metal sort of drum, kind of like this click, where it's like doom, 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 and it sounds really off, and you keep listening and it just sort of repeats and is so hypnotizing. But at the same time, there's something that's really chilling about it and it sounds like something is wrong. In fact, I feel like this is a broken alarm in a sense of where it kind of builds this dangerous sound that builds and builds and into a cacophonous, this mind-altering like soundscape. And what this really reminded me of is, I believe there was that scene in Get Out where I remember the guy was being like hypnotized and he was falling behind like the screen of his eyes and he starts being suspended in midair. That's exactly what I imagine when I listen to this song, is when that starts, it feels like I'm being pulled back like behind my eyes and I'm seeing everything going on around it, but it's pitch black, falling and losing myself, and I'm just getting further and further away as the song goes on. However, it seems as if when I wake up, which feels like Oxygen, sort of the wake up and sort of the rebirth itself, and just the excitement of it, this song really is just the downfall, and it just becomes extremely twisted, extremely fast, but it builds itself in a fantastic way, especially when these drones come in, and it almost seems like smoke just flying over, taking over vision, taking over like a massive city, just smoke everywhere. It's raw but feels calculated, and it's this blend of these two different worlds that consistently keeps going on throughout this album that keeps it interesting. The crushing cymbals, wailing noises, high-pitched frequencies. This song in itself is just a magnificent masterpiece of sound, and it really is only number 7. That's just puts into perspective. It's a 10, by the way. Jesus Christ. Number 6, Nathalie Neal. It might not have as big of a connection as everything else, but I just think that this is an extremely underrated track, especially near the very tail end of this thing. I feel like it is really led into extremely well, following up after Oxygen, where it just has this really great build-up that feels like a million heads just flying all over the place, constantly going blah, 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 and then you hear this guitar that goes on, which is another one of those moments that just is perfect for this album. Then you hear the spoken word, and all of this stuff is great and all. It sounds really cool. It sounds like this Soundtracks for the Blind soundscape, where it definitely sounds like something that could fit on that album. It's just such an oddball experience. The piano keys also add to the aesthetic, and all of this just leads into this marching guitar sound that adds into basically one of the most intoxicating guitar riffs on the entire album, that basically just has me like, and it keeps repeating that and building on that and becoming more and more intense, but it is absolutely druggy as hell. It's glorious. It is like a battle march. This song itself is a dedication. It sounds like to this person saying live forever in this song, almost saying either this is a dedication to birth or an end of life sort of thing. Dedication. It's a song dedicated to this person, and it really just builds itself into a fantastic psyche. It is an expedition, and it's another wormhole of thought, to where it almost feels like the beginning is like a wormhole, and going into the song is a wormhole, and leaving it's like another wormhole. It's sort of the same structure that Bring the Sun kind of went through. It's like a wormhole going through like one idea to the next, throwing you in. But this one seems almost like it's more glorious, like it's more of a floating, less extreme version of that. And what you see on the other side is absolute war and chaos and mayhem throughout this song, like sound of this freaking song. It doesn't sound ugly. It sounds rather like victory, success, and achievement. It is such a great track for the last leg, and I think that this thing is so underrated just because of how it builds sound together, and it really readies you. And when I say it readies you, I mean it freaking readies you for To Be Kind, which I'll get into. Nathalie Neal. And it's this glorious slowdown that absolutely calms everything down. It is like this passage song. People say like, oh, you know, you could throw this song out of the album, it'll be the same. No, you can't. You can't get rid of a song like Nathalie Neal. You just can't. It's the perfect length, perfect cool down. 10 out of 10. Number 5 is Screenshot. Now, a lot of people will be like, really? Why is this so low? It's such a great song. Yes, you're right. It is a great song. I got nothing else to say. It's a great song. Look, if To Be Kind is a roller coaster of emotions, then Screenshot is basically like your seatbelt, alright? It is a thing that grabs you and straps you in, especially with the first couple of seconds of here with the do, 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 do. It is so catchy, and it builds on quickly onto that. It doesn't slow down, it doesn't like waste your time at all. It just do, 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 do. You then hear Michael Gira come in, and it sounds like a normal song, you know? You got your singing, you got your drones going left and right, and the song itself is so druggy, it's so mind-bending, and it's so relaxing. It is like the perfect send-off into what you're about to get yourself into. It is not the biggest and most gargantuan song on here, but it's definitely a song that shows the structure of starting off slow, building up, and just fizzling out, which is something that's replicated a lot in a lot of different creative ways throughout the rest of this album. It is the first footsteps you take on this odyssey, if you may. The themes themselves definitely seem very basic, where it's talking about love, time, this, that, stuff. It's hypnotic, it's very relaxed, and in a sense it definitely seems like it's tackling the simplicity of like items and things. But then he comes in and he's like, no pain, no fear, no time, no this, no that. These phrases in themselves feel so cold and free in a sense, to where they seem like they're just said not out of spite, not saying out of telling someone not to do something, but rather saying it and as yourself, like you're freeing yourself of such things. Even as it builds up and it gets more intense with the vocals and the yelling, it doesn't seem like it's being yelled towards anybody. And words. This album really gets to me. I've been talking for 30 minutes. And when that arpeggiator comes in, you know the one. Do 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 do. That thing is one of those perfect moments that I talk about. That's every single song basically has one of them. That's the one there. It sounds absolutely perfect. I mean, this really just sort of showcases what the intricacies and capabilities of this album possibly hold. I mean, the song really picks up speed and aggression with the singing, and it keeps building higher and higher and towering even taller and taller until it just explodes. It explodes, and explosions, boom, pow, kapow, gee, choo, she, foo. And what's funny is right when you think it's at its peak with the explosion, it comes in again. An even bigger explosion. This song really just showcases how big the sounds on this album can get, but I feel like it doesn't even show it. It's like a tease in a sense to what you're about to experience throughout this album. It is the perfect showcase to get someone who is not like initially familiar with the sound. Like, this is the perfect introductory song to this entire album. It's so bright, it's so lively. The explosion itself is just massive beyond comprehension with these colossal bells, bright frequencies, and this interstellar-sized fizzle at the end. It is just something that really shows the listener what can be behind the corner. This is a 10, absolutely.
Slow the oxygen!
Yeah, number 4, freaking oxygen. Holy crap, this song. Holy crap, this song. It is good. And it is like 10 times better within the context of the album, with what I mentioned with the previous song feeling like it attaches itself to where this feels like the rebirth, the freedom. Especially with the oxygen, like saying, I can breathe. It is given such a new light. It is said this thing that seems so ridiculously mediocre in our eyes to where it's something that we do all the time. He's just taking it to this new scale. I steal all the oxygen! And it almost seems like he's running around a stadium screaming this. It's a shorter track and definitely a more intense cut that definitely starts off really like intense. You can parallel it with Screenshot and the way that it starts out. The screams and the yells on Oxygen are very cartoonish beyond measure, but yet some of these most intense, crushing, like, vocal performances he could have possibly given. They don't become annoying, rather they actually add to the aesthetic and the feel to where they feel natural. They don't feel like they're being done out of spite to annoy the listener. This song is just so creative, fun, intense, immense, massive, explosive beyond belief. Explosive, explosive, explosive. I steal all the oxygen! Wow! Wow! It's just so unexpected and so loud. But the opus of this song, I know I say opus a lot, but the absolute opus is the very ending, to where it seems like Michael Gira, he screamed his lungs out and you're about to get the cool down. You're about to get the burnout, but it's not that at all actually. In fact, it's one of the most crushing and insane moments on this entire album where these horns just seem like they keep pushing in waves as massive as possible. And every time I hear that, that's exactly what I do. I slam myself down. I feel like I'm God, throwing rocks all over the place. Like wah, wah, rah. But jeez, the energy of the song is some of the most I've ever seen captured within a single musical piece. This is one of the most. Here's my notes. Literally, is just me slamming my keyboard from this thing. Like it's literally just me slamming my keyboard. I don't even know what to even say besides that. The song literally just trips you over and just your keyboard's gone. And it ends off perfectly also. It's a 10. Great 10. It's like a really great 10. Number 3, we got a song that is not nearly as intense as Oxygen. It's actually the second song on this album. And definitely the first song kind of shows you the abrasive side of this album. But then this is sort of the song that showcases the emotional side of this album. Because this song is like an absolute journey in itself. Like first of all, it starts with this glorious, just really dirty drone. And as soon as that bass hits and you hear these contrasting boom, 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 boom. What is done with this bass when it keeps swinging back and forth is just unreal. It almost is like something that constantly keeps hitting left and right, and every time it hits, like something new happens, and it's fantastic what's built off of this. It's a glorious dance of sound. The psychedelia is absolutely the magnum opus of this song, because when you hear this song, it's impossible not to swing along to the groove of this song. The instrumental pieces that pop out all just pop out of surprise, and they add this suspense. Everything in the song is just so suspenseful. It's gentle but hard-hitting. It is relaxed but yet intense. The lyrics are about sleeping in the belly of man and woman, and it makes no sense, but however, it doesn't need to make sense. In fact, everything about this album almost feels like it's led up to interpretation, and I think that's fantastic. Because first it seems like it's talking about pregnancy, sleeping in the belly of woman, but sleeping in the belly of man is almost like this complete confusion. And it almost is saying like, I'm just a little boy. Maybe it's about not understanding. And that's one thing about this, is this whole song, it's built with these lyrical themes. It doesn't seem like it's taken away from some nonsensical ideas. In fact, I feel like the songs like Kirsten Supine and To Be Kind, that seem like the lucid breakdowns in a maybe more adult perspective, really just add like this extra immensity to these songs like this, to where they seem like nonsensical things that are just like flying around, because it shows that this is not just some stupid nonsense, that actually ties together into the record. And I think that's fantastic, the fact that there were actual songs on here that seemed very cohesive and understanding, to where it seemed like there was some poetry to it that made these songs. Screenshot, Just a Little Boy, Bring the Sun, songs like those, She Loves Us, all of those songs with just these nonsensical screams and shouts. It adds context to that, especially here. Now, Just a Little Boy, when he starts saying, I'm just a little boy, and you hear the crowd laughter, it's very unsettling at first, but I feel like it's supposed to be unsettling. It's fantastic as it keeps going on. In fact, the reason that this song is so high up is because it's something that builds its emotional structure throughout the sound, rather than relying specifically on cheap tactics. Instead of just creating these, obvious fake deep themes, it rather hits you hard through these heavy riffs that are followed by really intense statements, especially with the I'm just a little boy, and then when he says I'm not human and you hear the guitars, that sounds like stress to the max, like not being able to have control over yourself. In fact, loss of control is almost what this entire song is about. There was one point of the song to where, I almost interpreted this thing like 5 different times, depending on the day. But one of them is especially like a child star. Imagine that. Imagine someone who's brought into fame, or at least was given this thing, and they're saying, I'm just a kid, and the world is sort of laughing at them. Like they're not taken seriously at this point, and they're saying, I'm only human. I need love. Like living in a wonderland. Those 4 statements are so hard-hitting, especially with the instrumental that follows them. And it's an 11-minute track that never, ever gets boring. I am shivering every time I hear this, throughout the front to the very back of this song. It is something that gives you so much suspense that is almost unreal. Actually, the first time I heard this song, I wasn't paying it that much attention, so I was like, wow, this is some weird garbage. So I skipped it. And then when I actually sat down and paid attention to the song, I was just in shock, taking so much emotion out of just instrumentals and piecing things together. It's a masterpiece of storytelling. It really is. It's so crushing, and the end of this thing is just It's defeated, but it's built well. It almost wrings tears out of my eyes every time that there's this because I'm just like I'm scrunching my face and tears are forcing their ways out. And it's really just an intense song. So well deserving of this 10 I'm giving it. It's so well deserving. Now we get to the top 2. Now these top 2 are very interesting because they're probably the most important to this album. Number 2 is To Be Kind. Now I kept going back and forth between To Be Kind and Bring the Sun, which is something I never thought I'd do because I was pretty sure that Bring the Sun was number 1 until I sort of put in perspective what exactly To Be Kind means to this album. Because every time I hear To Be Kind, it is way more impactful than every time that I hear Bring the Sun. Because To Be Kind is one of those songs that in context of the album is Jesus Christ. It is something special. It really just transcends thought and mind. And the fact that this is another song that's very lucid, and it ends off the entire album, it is something that really puts in perspective every single theme that was built up previous. And after a 2-hour, beautiful, crushing, magical, freaking unreal experience, this song is the absolute cherry on top in every single sense of the word. It wraps up the album in almost this dedication to the son or child, and it takes a look at this massive soundscape. It's a lullaby, and it almost feels like holding the child and kind of putting him to sleep. Chanting what it means to be kind, what it means to be human. It wraps up the themes of the album perfectly. It takes this human experience and turns it into something galactic and unreal in this perspective, especially saying there's millions and millions of stars in your eyes, as that seems like something that someone would say is like a compliment. This almost feels like saying that your existence is so unreal to where, like, songs like Kirsten that we're bringing up, like stars clashing together and planets bringing in God raining ash. This feels like something to where he's saying, like, your eyes are so spectacular. Everything about you is that's so small is so phenomenal that it's at this scale of stars being in your eyes. This also takes you out of the perspective of the child, which feels like what was going throughout most of these songs, and brings you back into, say, a perspective of a parent looking back at that child. And when he does sing about the stars in the eyes, it's like the slowest singing I've ever heard. Intense. There are millions and millions of stars in your eyes. That's repeated 4 times, and every time that it's repeated, you hear guitars, you hear cymbals building up, and it's almost like it's trying to take off, bring it up to space, like it's ready to shoot off to the moon. And I feel like the drones and everything also adds into that aesthetic, especially with the eyes being stars, and just as soon as everything just comes together, as soon as he finishes off saying it. This song takes new life, and I mean that as in it goes through quite possibly one of the greatest like musical journeys. Just it's an absolute odyssey with so much to pick up just from these 5 minutes, ending off this 2-hour complete experience. The song finally, once he finally says in your eyes, the song takes off. You feel it moving upwards, and then it's suspense, and then all of a sudden, boom! Explosion! Fireworks! Everything keeps going up again. It's flying up. Everything's flying up in this colossal, colorful explosion of drums and guitars and these massive just riffs on top of riffs. It's this colossal wall of sound that looks like the massive finale that you come to expect. And then the album ends. I'm just kidding. Boom! Another one! You think that it's done, and it's not. It just explodes again into another colossal, colorful, even more colorful than the last explosion, in different colors than the last, in different sounds, with more guitars and more drums, and this blast of massive energy flying towards you. And you're just sitting there in awe as it keeps hitting you over and over. When I was getting to this part of the album, like after 2 hours, I was like, there's no way it's gonna end right here. I felt like I needed more. And however, when you hear that fade out, it keeps going. into another gargantuan wall of sound, this one even more crushing than the last, and they keep crushing into you and blasting pieces of intense music that just capture everything in the album so well. It just pushes you into this new life form and squeezing the life out of you like a sponge, and you expect it to be done, but it's not. It just keeps going, and it's this crushing wall of sound. It just is a ball of fireworks you expect to just calm down, but then you hear this guitar and it starts bouncing in out of nowhere, and you're like, God damn. It goes nuts. It goes psycho. It builds into one of the most intense musical experiences I've ever witnessed. I mean, heard. It turns into this crushing, sort of like how Oxygen was building, except for this feels like it's more just taking your head and squeezing it and just bending it into these weird, like bending space and time levels of bending. Like there's so much freaking edge to this thing. It's so intense. It sounds like the world is like a cannon. It's just like, it's crushing so easily. Everything around you is exploding in a massive ball of fire, and the world is just ending. And it fades. It fades, and all you can ask yourself, there needs to be more. It is a song that closes off the album that makes you wish there was more. It is an unreal experience of a song, and that's only number 2. This is actually, it's really strong enough to break my scale, and I can say that with confidence. I've only ever given a few songs this scoring before, even though this is number 2, but what this song does and represents is so unreal that it's so deserving of this, and I couldn't give it any less. It's an 11 out of 10. It's an 11. And that's number 2. Ladies and gentlemen, number 1. Now, the thing about Bring the Sun, I wrote up 2 pages on this song. Now, 2 pages, single-spaced Arial, 11 size font, and I'm debating if it's worth it. In reality, I just played you an 8-second clip of the song, which, I mean, it's a 34-minute song. I played you like 8 seconds of it. Everything about this song is really critical, but just, this is a song you can't really preview in any length of time. It's something to where you just gotta sit down and you gotta experience this thing. And I think that on vinyl, yeah, when you got this thing on vinyl, and listening to this thing out loud on like the biggest speaker system ever, you will probably lose all of your ear cells to this thing, because this is one of those songs that you just crank the frick up, okay? You blast this damn song to oblivion, and that's why I lost all my hearing, because of this song. Bring the Sun / Toussaint Louverture is a goddamn masterpiece, and I'd say it's at the same exact level as To Be Kind. I'd put really close to them, like depending on the day, 1 and 2, they're both just spectacular beyond comprehension. What Swans have done here with this song doesn't feel humanly possible. In fact, creating a 34-minute song that is extremely cohesive and sticks to an idea that I actually, whenever the song shows up on shuffle, like I have to really debate if I skip, like, because I love this song that much. So when it shows up, it takes 34 minutes of my time up. That alone, being able to do that is just such an unreal achievement that should be it. That should be all it takes. But you know what? I really have to tackle down this song. If you don't want to listen to it, you can skip to this part where I go to my final thoughts. But here we go. All right. This song is uninspiring. I mean, breaking down this song feels just impossible. However, I'm going to attempt to do so. It starts off with a very beautiful just drone. You hear these mild instrumental like things going on in the background, and as soon as you just hear this crushing at the 24-second mark, it blows your freaking socks off. Like it is so surprising when it shows up. It just takes you by surprise, and it is an absolute wall of sound to the biggest definition of that. In fact, it's so much of a wall of sound that if you were to take the EQ and then just bring up like certain areas, you'd hear like individual instruments just all piled on top of each other. However, it almost feels impossible that something that is this intricate, with this massive wall of sound that is built, that is mixed so fantastically well to everything just sounding like it blends without anything cutting out of the mix. The only thing that really cuts is the cymbal, the crash, which is one of the most crisp sounding pieces of freaking music ever, man. The drums on here, they hit you in the face every time. This pummeling goes on. And I say pummeling not lightly. This pummeling goes on for a good 3 minutes or something, and as soon as it does, it just slows down. It dies down, man. When it fades down, it turns into this very gentle synth. It gives you a nice little cushion, and you're still confused what the hell is going on. However, it seems as if this slowdown is basically everything. It's everything. You hear that light synth, you hear that whoa going across. Let me tell you right now what I feel like. You ever just been put in a body bag and you're getting dragged through the desert and there's the 100-degree hot weather, the sun is beating on you, and then you got these dudes, you don't know who, they're dragging you back to a cave. That's exactly how this feels to me. It feels like the sun is as light as possible. It is the hottest day in the world and I'm being dragged through the sand. The guitars and bass creep up, which help transition the scene from A to B so fantastically. Especially when Michael Gira comes in with his and he's moaning that you can't even understand what the hell is going on. But it's this lack of knowing and lack of understanding that helps give this song that massive appeal and massive feel that it deserves. It's almost like you're constantly at the edge of your seat, like you don't know what's around the corner, especially since you were just hit with this massive wall out of nowhere. Literally anything can happen. It just seems like you never know what's around the corner. And what happens is this song slowly builds up into one of these, the loudest possible freaking blasts of sound, where it keeps building on with boom, and it does that for like 7 minutes, and it keeps going, and it adds, and then eventually you hear bring the sound. It's like this massive chant. This song absolutely defines an epic odyssey, especially with the journey and the chant that goes on. It almost feels like he's asking the sun literally to come down on them. And as it keeps going louder and louder, it feels like they're succeeding. It feels like the success of bringing the sun down to earth and colliding. It is about as loud and gargantuan as you could physically get. It builds so loud that it eventually just bursts into a supernova. And I don't mean that just as a metaphor. I mean the song sounds like literally the stars bursting into a freaking supernova with all these colossal space sounding themes and ideas that just lead even further into this odyssey. It's like the cymbals work like fireworks constantly whenever they hit, and it's like and you hear them crashing down. Like the fireworks and just these explosive loud bursts of fire are so obviously portrayed throughout these sounds that it's remarkable how well that was interpreted and how well that was put into it. And he knew that he could make something sound like a literal fireball without having to dumb it down. You get this grace period that transitions between Bring the Sun and To Saint, and this is just a glorious moment in itself, and it just seems to keep you suspended. And I don't just mean that in like suspense, I mean like it literally feels like you're suspended in the air, like you're suspended in space, or like you don't know where the hell you are. I mean, you get these odd tappings, you get like the saw moving back and forth and horses going on, and you hear freedom. It's so clear, it sounds so nice, it sounds so free. And it's at this point you realize that you're halfway through the track. That's right. This is the halfway point. 17 minutes in. And it just keeps going. You hear the horses going on, and then it's just like there's so many things thrown at you. You're so confused, but it's almost like wormholes that you're constantly traveling through. It's like they've succeeded at bringing the sun, or at least they're in space in some way, and it almost seems like they're flying in the air. I mean, when I first heard this song, I was just in complete shock when it was finished, because I never checked the time of like when it was like where it was at. I just had this song playing. I knew it was a long song, so I was like, alright, I just laid back, and when it finally finished, like I'll get into the end of this thing, but Jesus Christ. Now, when transitioning into the To Saint song, we get this massive descent of sound that almost feels like you're just literally getting sucked through a wormhole. And as it keeps going forward, and as you keep flying through this thing, it develops into different sounds, and eventually you hit the end, and you hear these glorious jingle bells. It's so beautiful, despite the ugly nature of what you're seeing. It's almost like you just drop down out of this wormhole, and boom, you're in a volcano. You're ready for the next setting that's going on here, and this creativity, and this color, and this like magnificent glory is just brought in with these drums, and all of a sudden it seems like the spotlight is on Michael Gira as he has a children's book in front of him, and he's reading To Saint Louviator, and he's just screaming out of his lungs, and you hear like geysers behind him. You see volcanoes, you see like bursts of steam, and you hear these explosive cymbals and crashes, and it's like this instrumental and this drum like do 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 is going like calm, but you almost hear just him just like yelling out and doing whatever. And it's this like little thing. I know this sounds like it's totally out of place, but for me, this adventurous taking everything and blowing it to this massive gargantuan proportion is really what this album's all about. So imagining that all of a sudden it's like sitting down and hearing this guy telling a story, and it all of a sudden just being so larger than life feels like it's like capturing this childish vibe. Now, I don't know much Spanish. I know he keeps saying sangre es amor. Amor es sangre. I think that means like, you know, he's love or something. And it makes no sense, but it doesn't have to. What matters is the soundscape builds on it, and it's this confusion that adds to it because it knows what it's trying to keep your attention on. And as the song keeps going, as it keeps getting more and more intense, all of a sudden, it almost seems like that wormhole that you got sucked down through, you're all of a sudden sucked back up through. And it actually feels like you're just flying through the air as fast as possible. So when I first heard this song, I was actually on a plane, and it really is something crazy when this actually happened, because I felt it. Like sonically, it made me feel something that is so violent. I was like just in absolute awe of this song. Not like physically, but the feeling of what it tried representing was so real that it just it's mind-blowing. Especially with this lifting, and as soon as you're left there and you're suspended, it feels like literally you've been just like you're in midair. You hear the and when I was flying, man, I'm telling you, man, it actually felt like I was falling to my death. It felt real. It felt like I was falling. I like felt like my skin became extremely heavy. Like everything about me was just like dragged down. Everything was just like falling like crazy. And it was just so fast and so rapid, and you hear this massive loud wall that builds up that lasts so long, that's so violent and so vigorous and so volatile and so violent and so crazy and so volatile and so violent. And then all of a sudden, thud. Like you hit the surface and there's a single note that plays out. One note dragged out throughout this entire thing. 7 out of 10. I'm just kidding. That's like this song. The fact that you can take 34 minutes and create what you created, especially like even without context of the album, which just like elevates it to new levels. Even without context, the way that this song is shaped and formed together to make it to where it feels like in 34 minutes you made it feel like the most epic journey I've ever explored on through sound, that is something that is so tough to capture. So tough. So unreal. And this song really just blows my freaking mind every time I hear it. And I'm glad to say that this is an 11. Because those two songs, To Be Kind and this, both really just, they alter how I think when I'm listening to them. They really just put in perspective this absolutely mind-boggling experience. It's into almost incomprehensible levels of intensity. And I think that's where I'm going to lead it off. I actually have more footage than I probably ever recorded for any one of these videos. So let me just wrap up To Be Kind. This album is something else. And when I say something else, I mean, I feel like what he was trying to go for here is something that is more ambitious than most people can even dream of thinking of. Like, it is one of those albums that is like, it caused me to really start listening to more music, listening to more albums, and really caring about the album format more. It showed me how ambition can truly drive artists to create just fantastic pieces of music. This stands as one of my favorite albums of all time. It's just a fantastic piece of music. This is something that is just unreal beyond explanation, that I feel like you just have to experience for yourself. And I feel like you need to at least listen just once to really understand just what exactly this album is capable of doing. This album is fantastic to me. I've heard this thing so many times. It's an unreal experience, and I definitely say with full confidence that To Be Kind by Swans is a 10. My name is Bradley. I have a bad taste in music. If you like what I do here, make sure you subscribe, leave notifications, do the extra step because YouTube algorithm. Anyways, I should stop. YouTube still doesn't pay me, by the way. I don't even know I'm making this video. Mostly because I need to tackle this freaking album so badly. It's one of those albums that just, you can't just say it's good. It really just boggles me. My name is Bradley. I've read this music. I'll see you next video.